Patrick Mahomes, and a few other things that just need to be talked about. Let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to the Chief in the North on RGR Football. I am Seth Kaiser, or Minnesota Chiefs fan, the Chief in the North. Coming to you from Minnesota on a day where it's like 85 degrees outside, so it doesn't really feel like I'm the Chief in the North today. But coldness does not a Chief in the North make. As those of you who are here undoubtedly know, every week we try to provide a little bit of insight as to what's going on with the Chiefs. I answer some mailbag questions. I talk about some of the things that I've been working on lately at the Chief of the North newsletter, which is my Substack where I write about all things Chiefs. And we basically just have a lot of fun every week. Every week I say I'm crushed for time. I am once again crushed for time. And then every week I go longer than I intended to. So we'll see if I do that again this week. There's some mailbag questions that you guys had from last week's recording, which I appreciate. I'll answer those. And then I've got some other mailbag questions that I received from other places. And I kind of smashed some of them together into summaries because there were 5 main topics that people kept asking about. So I'm going to get into those. And if you have a mailbag question that you want to be featured and have it prioritized, put it in the comment section below, put a question mark in front of it, and those are the ones I'll always get to first. The other things I want to talk about today is a little bit of fun I had writing about Patrick Mahomes breaking charts this week, which is always so much fun to do. And then I want to talk just a little bit about what the Chiefs are doing moving forward and kind of what that looks like in terms of maybe the DeAndre Hopkins situation. What's going to be really funny, and you know what I really ought to do? I'm going to keep Twitter open while I do this because there's always the off chance that something crazy happens as I'm recording, which, as some of you pointed out in the comments below, one of the things that happened last week was, I record, we have our thing, we have fun, and then in the meantime, suddenly DeAndre Hopkins is released. I've had a lot of people ask me about that. Right now, the Chiefs are doing OTAs. There's lots of great places you can read about what they're doing at OTAs. They are very over-glorified practices, often without pads. And we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means and what that doesn't mean. So let's get into the mailbag questions. Let's work our way through those, and we'll see how far we get and how far I go over what I plan on doing. Tracy and Neely asked, with the DeAndre Hopkins news coming out quickly, do you see them getting an extension with Jones done? You'll become one of my son's favorite Chiefs YouTuber. Well, that's really kind of you. Thank you. Especially considering how little effort I put into making things look pretty. I could probably do a better job with that, but then I'd have to learn things. And maybe one day if this becomes my full-time gig. But for right now, I'm busy doing, the lawyer stuff and some of that other stuff. So it means a lot to me that you enjoy what we do here, and me in particular, because everyone else here is much more technologically astute than I am, so they make it look pretty. Whereas me, I don't look pretty. I don't really sound particularly pretty. So I take it as you enjoy just talking Chiefs. Chris Jones extension, it's been reported, and I believe it's accurate, that it's a priority for the Chiefs to get it done. The money thing is going to be a deal there because it's a lot of money. He's probably looking for something that's just a little bit south of Aaron Donald's deal, but north of what every other defensive tackle has gotten. It's not going to be cheap. I wish they'd gotten it done before some of these other defensive tackle contracts got done, unless, his position was in the stratosphere. And so they actually thought it would help having guys like Simmons be signed long-term to where you could kind of set a realistic benchmark. Here's one thing. A Chris Jones contract extension would certainly provide them with a lot more cap space in 2023 because, the way these contracts are dealt with and the fact that he's like a $26 million cap hit or something. So even if his first year hit were much larger than normal, like $15 million or something, it would still save them a great deal of money. However, it would be a large cash expenditure in all likelihood. It would probably have a large signing bonus. And that's something that actually has come up quite a bit with the Chiefs lately, is that when teams deal with salary cap stuff, it's not just about the salary cap. It's also about cash considerations, to borrow a term that they use in Major League Baseball. It's about cash spending as well. Now, Clark Hunt has plenty of money. The Chiefs ownership group has plenty of money. However, they also have a budget. And fans don't like to hear this, and it sometimes annoys me too, quite frankly. But generally speaking, the Chiefs are not huge spenders in terms of cash. And while you can play around with the salary cap itself, the numbers eventually get accounted for, but you can play around with when they hit and how they hit and always kick the can down the road. But cash is cash. It's just what gets spent. And so if Chris Jones, signs a new deal and gets like a $20 million signing bonus or something like that, that's a cash expenditure that's out the door that goes towards that basic framework that the Chiefs have to work with, because they 100% have a cash budget as well. And that's probably set in place by ownership. And so that's where I think you might end up with some of the hangups. If they've said, this is the amount of cash that what our ceiling is for 2023, we're not going to go above that. Well, then even if if that cash, let's say, they're at right here right now, okay, just for purpose sake. Well, then the Chris Jones extension takes them to here. Suddenly they don't have a lot to play with in terms of what they might give DeAndre Hopkins. Well, they do, but not under their budget. And that's where I don't know how hard line the cash budget rule is. Unlike, some of the situations you've seen with Mark Davis, where the Raiders are somewhat cash poor to where they're unable to do certain things. That's not the case with the Chiefs. It might just be more a matter of whether or not they're willing to do it. So that's kind of a long road to a short thought there. But those cash option, or not cash options, but the cash budget is something to think about in terms of figuring out whether or not the Chiefs will do something. Very different question from whether or not they should, because there's a strong argument to be made that they've got plenty of money. And the more you win, the more money that comes in. But from a business perspective, as much as that might bum me out or bum you out, from a business perspective, if the bottom line and income isn't necessarily changed by the extra expenditure on a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, then that might not be considered a reason to go beyond the cash budget. It's not my money. I try not to pay attention to what other people do with their money. But I do think that's a very real consideration here. Richard Wayand says, great work, Seth. Thank you. Is Drew Tranquill going to replace Willie Gay? Tell about how the Chiefs should use Tranquill. Well, I actually wrote about Tranquill a ways back when the Chiefs signed him, which was kind of a surprising signing, I think, for a lot of us, because the Chiefs seemed relatively set at the linebacker position. And so I'll pull that up right now. So if you want to take a look, Drew Tranquill film review, he's a competent linebacker with a valuable skill set. And what I really liked about him was his ability, which is what I wrote about here. He had a big role in helping the Chargers protect the middle of the field. And so this snap right here doesn't look like much. It's not that big a deal. But you notice he doesn't get sucked up too far by the play action. And he stays in position for when that for when Noah Gray, in this case, goes on his route across the middle of the field. This play action is supposed to suck him far enough that Gray pulls in behind him, and in the meantime, the safety is held to this side. And so there's supposed to be a gap right here to exploit. And because Tranquill's a smart player that doesn't overcommit and has lateral quickness, he's able to take away that route. Things like that are not uncommon with I could restack that quote. Things like that are not uncommon on Drew Tranquill's film. He's a really, really good coverage linebacker. He's also pretty solid against the run, although I don't think he's quite as good against the run as Willie Gay Jr. or Nick Bolton are. But he's a really solid coverage backer. I don't think he's going to replace Willie Gay Jr. I mean, if you go, and I wrote about this after the Super Bowl, Gay's performance against the Super Bowl was maybe the best on the entire defense. He played extremely well. Nick Bolton had a good game as well. I think it's more of a situation where they had a guy available for a decent price who has a skill set that can help them with something they've been vulnerable with. I don't think the team is as committed to Willie Gay Jr. as I would be if I were them, because I think he's their best linebacker. But I do think that there's a possibility that they see in Tranquill, they see an opportunity to utilize more 3 linebacker and 2 linebacker sets without having to go to the 3 safeties as often, which given their current personnel layout maybe isn't as ideal for them because they lost Juan Thornhill. So now Cook gets moved up, and they don't know what they really have in the young guys yet in terms of that 3rd safety. So I think how I would use Tranquill would be he would be on the field for any obvious passing down snap, and he would be my 3rd linebacker with him and Willie Gay Jr., Nick Bolton. And you can always move Gay to the Sam spot in those 3 linebacker sets. I do like the idea of Willie Gay Jr. being left unblocked and, being put more as the will, but I don't know if Tranquill's a guy that can really play Sam. And so they've got a little sliding around to do. I mean, you could always put Willie Gay or Nick Bolton at Sam and then just let Tranquill play the Mike, which he's got some comfort level with. But given their commitment to Nick Bolton, I'm not sure that's something that you'll see. I do think he should have a sizable role in the defense. He's a very competent linebacker who's excellent helping defend the middle of the field, a place they really struggled last year. So hopefully that tells you a little bit. Otherwise, check out the article there. It was a much longer film review. You take a look at that. There were someone commented, I have a Tombstone pizza in the oven right now. Nice. Anyway, so I received a bunch of mailbag questions, not just on my Substack, but from other sources, and a lot of questions that I got resolved around the same things. I've kind of covered the DeAndre Hopkins thing. What I'll just say, there's 5 basic things I get asked about a lot. And the first, the DeAndre Hopkins. I've talked about this quite a bit, that it's the floor of the wide receiver room that scares me. The ceiling's actually really good because Tony's a really talented player. Sky Moore and Rashee Rice are both talented players. Marquez Valdez-Scantling's a solid veteran. And so the ceiling, if things work out with 2 of the 3 young guys, work out, could be a really excellent room. It's the floor that frightens me because you could see another direction going where Tony, Rice, and Moore, none of them really work out, whether it's because of injury or lack of development, that kind of sort of thing. And if that happens, then the wide receiver room is scary shallow and doesn't really have any playmakers there that of the type that you need. I mean, you're basically missing a competent receiver like a Juju Smith-Schuster or McCole Hardman who can fulfill a certain role if some of these guys don't develop or if Tony stays unavailable through injury. So to me, a signing of DeAndre Hopkins really helps raise that floor and also helps you more in individualized matchups. And what I mean by that is when you're a Super Bowl contender like the Chiefs, you have to think not just about how the offense plays as a whole all season long, but how is it going to perform in specific matchups against, press man coverage in the playoffs with good pass rushes. If Travis Kelce is getting haloed and everyone else is manned up, do you have someone that you trust to win? And maybe they trust Tony, and Tony certainly has the skill set to be that guy. Maybe they trust Rashee Rice. Maybe they trust Sky Moore. But again, you're talking about the ceiling versus the floor. If those guys don't work out, you don't have that guy. MVS had an incredible performance against the Bengals in the AFC Championship. Part of that was because of the way the Bengals chose to play them, and the way that they utilized single high coverage a few too many times and allowed MVS to win on some routes, getting some separation deep. You can't always count on that. And so to me, DeAndre Hopkins would be a floor signing to try to win, and then a matchup signing. So that's why I'd be in favor of it, but it's going to depend on the money. I've had a bunch of people ask me about, as Travis Kelce gets a little bit older, he doesn't sound like he's ready to hang it up anytime soon. Thank goodness. As he continues to chase GOAT status, which I think he's already achieved, but that's a conversation for another time, or actually just shortly, because the next thing I'm going to answer here. People ask me how they'll replace him. They won't. That's the short answer. You cannot replace Travis Kelce. You just can't. He is a one of one in the history of the NFL. Even other elite tight ends aren't great quite the same way he is. And so, you could replace him with, Shannon Sharp and have a drop off. And that's not a guy you can replace. And so what they need to be able to do is have a plan to pivot their offense away from the tight end being such a focal point. Now, do you find a guy who you think is competent that can still be a part of your offense? Of course. Hopefully multiple guys so you can keep running 12 and 13 personnel sets. But you can't replace Travis Kelce. You have to replace production through a number of avenues in the offense. And that's an important way to think about it. It's similar to, in the conversation we're going to be having in 15 years, hopefully. Hopefully not, 10. How do we replace Patrick Mahomes? Well, you don't. You don't replace guys who are one of one. That kind of brings me into the next question. I've had a few people reach out and talk about the level of success the Chiefs have had. 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, 5 AFC championships running, at least appearances, appeared in another Super Bowl, one of the better 5-year runs in league history, if you really examine it. And I've had people say, I'm finding myself caring less. I'm finding myself just not quite as invested. And I get that. I wasn't as emotional about the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl the second time as I was the first time. But I've had people ask me how I kind of maintain my enthusiasm for it. And here's my answer. Because again, winning is a lot like a lot of other worldly successes. There's diminishing returns, and it's never going to be quite as much as you think it is. Now, we could have a whole conversation about the meaning of life and stuff. I won't do that to you because we don't have a ton of time. But it's like people that have achieved what they want to achieve in their career. Quite often, when you reach the top of the mountain, you discover there's not quite as much up there as you thought there was. And I think fans see that when their team wins a championship, and it's incredible, and the moment is great. But it kind of leads to, well, now what? And so now the Chiefs have been to the top of the mountain twice. The players are still clearly hungry. They want more. And I want to see that too. That's still always going to be part of it. The bigger thing for me now at this point, though, obviously more Super Bowls matter in and of themselves a ton. And I'm excited to see it. And football is such a beautiful sport. I just love watching it. But for me, there's history being chased right now. By guys like Patrick Mahomes. He is chasing history. No one's had a start to a career like he has. The closest thing is Tom Brady, who obviously wasn't statistically close or as dominant as a player, but had as much success winning. And then other guys that were maybe a little bit closer statistically, like a Dan Marino or eventually a Peyton Manning. Even Manning, it's not close those first couple of years. Those guys, or Rodgers when he first started, they didn't have the same success that he's had. So he's got this unique path that he's on. And I really think that if things keep going the way they're going, one day, and crud, even if they just stopped all of a sudden today, you will have your kids and your grandkids asking what it felt like to see Patrick Mahomes. It will be like people, those of us who are old enough to watch, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, or watch Michael Jordan, or watch Derek Thomas, or, for me, watching Jamal Charles, like watching greats do their thing. And Mahomes might outshine virtually all of them. It's going to be like, people that, when Tiger Woods won everything in sight for like 5 years in a row, people were like, wow, what was that like? That's the type of history that's being chased here. Someone who's setting to reshape the NFL landscape in the same way. Like, okay, you have the Brady era. He's potentially going to do something that really, Montana kind of had his era for sure. Bradshaw, it was more about those teams. But right now, he's already halfway to the most number of Super Bowls won by a quarterback not named Tom Brady. You got 2 guys with 4, then Brady was 7, and then some guys with 2, and then a couple guys with 3. But like Mahomes is sitting there on this path. Travis Kelce is chasing being the greatest of all time. That the history stuff is what really interests me now, and that's what the Chiefs have a chance at. A couple other things that, once again, I'll have to go as fast as I can here. I've had multiple people ask me about the ceiling for the defense this year. And I would say when I talk about Drew Tranquill addressing one of the major problems they had last year, I think it's worth noting also that the cornerback room should be as good and hopefully better if guys develop in their second year, which isn't a guarantee, but does happen. And then you've got a safety room that I think may take a step back, but may not be too serious step back. Thornhill played an important role, but I think they trust Brian Cook to do a lot of those same things, and him and Justin Reed kind of trading off certain roles. And an improved linebacker group and a defensive line that Charles Omenihu, I think, has an opportunity to be better than any other secondary pass rusher they've had since 2018. If all those things fall into place, and it's really not that many things, Karlaftis builds a little on his rookie year. Maybe FAU can come in and be okay. You might have a better pass rush than they've had in previous years. Maybe Coburn can contribute like I think he can early. They have a chance to be the best defense of the Mahomes era, certainly the most talented. And so that'll be really interesting to see moving forward. I've had people ask about that. Yes, I think it could be a top 10 defense, but it just needs a couple things to fall into place. It's no guarantee. But I do think Tranquill was low key and underrated signing in that regard that might help address some of the issues they had with the middle of the field. The final thing I've had people ask me about is the overall pass protection. People are nervous about Smith and Taylor, which is kind of interesting to me because people weren't worried when it was going to be Taylor and like a rookie on the other side. Here's what I would say. Given how much better Taylor is than Wiley as a pass protector, and that's no disrespect to Andrew Wiley, it just is true based on his film, Wiley's film in Kansas City and Taylor's film in Jacksonville, if that stays the same. Smith would have to be a legitimately very bad player for the pass protection to not improve from what it was last year. If he's genuinely bad, then it might not improve. Otherwise, it should. And that's just something to think about in terms of like, with an offensive line, it's the sum of the parts. And Taylor is a high level pass protector. At least he was in Jacksonville this last year. With Smith, if he can even be average, then we'll see an overall improvement because there won't be any weak links there at that point. But we'll see how it goes. There were just a couple more things that makes it through a lot of the questions that I had there. I wanted to thank those of you that participated in the Substack mailbag. We had like 300 plus questions. You guys are maniacs and you're awesome, and I love it. Two things that I want you guys to know. Actually, we're just going to stick with the one for right now. Well, right now I'm working on writing my annual piece, The Most Fun Moments of 2022-2023 season. I'm so excited for that. I love writing about like the most fun moments. Some of them can be like unexpected, like even like in a loss, like when they were able to march down the field with like 10 seconds left against Buffalo in the first half. That was a fun moment. Like it was like, wow, anything really is possible with Mahomes, even though they lost the game. So that's kind of the ideas there, like actual fun moments. And so I'm going to be doing a two-parter on that. The other thing that I'd really like you to check out if you haven't is I wrote about Patrick Mahomes and how he's continuing to break charts. This is an unlocked piece because I want the whole world to be able to see it. And what I did is I basically gathered a bunch of charts where Mahomes is at the top right or otherwise just basically breaking the system. And one of my favorite ones is with a lead versus trailing. And this just goes to show like one of the things that makes Mahomes so great is the fact that when his team when it's tied or leading, he's the best in the league besides Drew Brees over the course of the last 5 years, right? But when they're trailing, you see how he's at an EPA per play, expected points added per play, basically moving the ball in a way that makes it more likely to score. He's a little below, he's about a little over a 0.25. When they're trailing, he's higher. There's nobody like Mahomes. He really is just this incredibly unique guy who isn't just the same when he's in a tough spot, because there's a few guys that are like that. Generally good quarterbacks are generally the same, like in a bad situation or maybe even a little bit better. He's markedly better. And so there are so many of these charts that you really should go check out. Man versus zone, game-winning scenarios, what happens when he's blitzed, throwing deep versus throwing shallow, multiple playoff or multiple touchdown games. Check that out. It's at the Chief of the North newsletter, and it's unlocked for anyone to read if you want to go check it out. And then chiefsfan.substack.com. In the meantime, I have gone over my time per usual. That's just what I do. I appreciate the questions as always. I'm excited to do this with you guys again next week. Get your questions in down there. Usually if I get even like just 6 or 7 in the comment section, I might even just stick to here and not even bother to go with Twitter. So that way I can really dive in on these things. That's the time I have for today. I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure to hit like, subscribe, do all the stuff that you got to do with YouTube. Support Ryan and the guys here. They do great work. And I'm here too. It's a great week to be a Chiefs fan. I'll see you guys next week.